Chapter 15. Jellyman to sort it out. This letter spells trouble for me. Trouble with a capital H. The third Fazakerley Reich bunker was spreading its dangerous nerve gases throughout the city, and had now come within a few inches of serious contamination of something important, namely my brain. The horrible old degenerate sod was taking things a bit far now. He could be dangerous, what with his private arsenal and possible links with other nutcases around the city. Nutcases around the city being big fat skinheads with peculiar approaches to our society, like kicking people in the face with their Doc Marten boots. Or old fellas with opinions formed before the First World War. Or fat, greasy politicians calling themselves things like Force 7, Column 5, or Action Brigade, and joining up with the skinheads and old fellas. You've got to be careful, as Calpurnia said to Julius Caesar on the Ides of March. I told Leroy because I didn't think I had any choice. And I told Claudia. She said, "Why don't we wait until this conference thing at Devlin's is over? And me and Leroy have grabbed our ton and got the shit out of the place before we decide to do anything about that old get, okay?" I agreed, but only on the surface. This was the kind of thing that the Romans were good at. Secret schemes and ambitions to be discovered at a later date, such as the first triumvirate between Caesar, Crassus and Pompey. Such as lots of other incidents. Now I was doing a bit myself. My plan was to fix things for good with old Harry and rid myself of a severe mental torment. First of all, I would engage the services of Jellyman, the notorious nightclub owner who Leroy claims as his brother in God. I've heard a lot about this man, and I've always wanted to meet him because he's the kind of man who can get things done. And things means everything. Suppose you wanted to find a way of making someone do something, like, say, cut his hand off. Well, Jellyman's the man to look for, and he'd provide the axe as well. Truth is, I'm not being a coward about this, but I might need some extra encouragement if I'm going to do the job well. The opportunity for this, of course, would be the day of the conference when both Leroy and Claudia would be busy at the Eagle. I promised to cover for Leroy with Alf Speed, so there would be transport and support on second hand. The second thing would be to confront old Harry straight to his face and accuse him of sending the letters and generally trying to stir things up. Thirdly, we would warn the old bugger to behave himself in future and to have a healthier attitude to other people, even if they were born with two heads and claimed to be from the planet Thingrilof in the galaxy Delta Centauri. In the evening, the whole thing would be finished, and then I could get slightly drunk in the company of others at the Eagle, seeing as I would be on duty anyway. And Devlin's got me doing all kinds of research as well about this second conference he's setting up. And with me being what he considers the contact point for networking with the black community, I'm the one that's given all the hard work. One day he sent me down to that maritime museum in the Albert Dock to take notes on what he called the Middle Passage, and to bring back a pile of material for copying so it could be stuck up on the wall. When I gave him the leaflets and pictures of slaves, he said, "Oh, terrible what our forefathers did to these people, Ted. It really is. And we should do all we can to make up for it, right? Pay back our debt to our coloured brothers and sisters for the sins of the Middle Passage. You get me?" I was tempted to remind him of which particular Middle Passage he'd been interested in with Claudia, but I needed to keep my job, so I kept my mouth shut. Also, I'm forced into the business of buying what Devlin calls ethnic delicacies, which I was told had to be red-coloured and hot with funny names. So I got Leroy to supply me with piles of those wicked little chilies from Mr. Halal's supermarket, with the intention of causing Devlin problems on the toilet the morning after eating. This was something I knew about to my own discomfort, having eaten one of Leroy's top 10 dishes made out of fire and brimstone. And when we get all this ready, he's on at me to help in strategic management of the conference. Not having a clue what this meant, and not wanting another gob full of devil and sarcasm, I kept my mouth shut in the hope he'd forget. But it didn't work out like that. Course you know what strategic management is, don't you? You had no problem with it when we talked about it this morning, right? What will your input be then? I was completely stuck. I didn't have a clue what he was going on about, so I had to fall back on the foodstuff business. I just said, well, I've managed to get a hold of some red and green coloured vegetables to give an ethnic feeling to the conference, which is what, Mr. Devlin, I thought you wanted. And I got some yellow ones as well. Ha! Clear as a bell. You don't know what you're talking about. Yellow vegetables is strategic management. God. If I told the fellas on the NVQ level 4 about that one, they'd piss themselves laughing. No, lads. What we in management call strategic management is like the overall design of your whole plan. You get me? I must have nodded because he continued to spout on. You see, in this case, what we're talking about is structure, ideas, and the seminar sequence for the event. You got me? What was he going on about? I was thinking. And God help Leroy and Claudia if they got involved in all of this like they said they would. For a couple of weeks, ever since I told Mr. D about Leroy agreeing to talk at the conference, Leroy had been doing all kinds of work, abandoning his karate and such like so he could get his spirit together. When he was going out to the Eagle on the morning of the conference, I said to him, "Good luck, old pal. What are you going to talk about anyway? Because Devlin's up to all sorts." "Ah, a serious brother Tidward. Serious. A serious business, brother Tidward. And me have managed to convince the man about the importance of the thing, see? The title is Race, Colour, Sect, Ethnic Group, Class, Gender, Sexuality, Disability, and Age in today's world with regard to the inner cities. 'Cause I chose the title myself. That way I can talk about everything. Give the whole friggin' shower at them some decent reasoning. For a fortnight, me think the reasoning out, you see, will be good, you know." I wished him luck. I remember his conversation that time when he compared the world to a snooker table, with all the men and women being snooker balls. I asked him what Claudia was going to talk about, and he told me that her talk was on women and single parents. I quite fancied getting along to that one. I reckon Claudia could probably say a few interesting things. The day started off well. Alf called for me at 11 o'clock and said there was only one job on, so we'd go for a bit of a liquid lunch. I said I needed to see the notorious Jellyman, and Alf said, "All the better to drink with, little Red Riding Hood." I said nothing in reply, sensing that Alf might have already supped something of an alcoholic nature. Leroy told me that Jellyman lived above his club, the Adawat Club, and that I should accept any invitation to go inside, as the place was worth seeing. Jellyman was a man with a serious slant on the world, and he was proud of his home. I knocked on the door, and there was Jellyman. Must be 6'5" and 24 stone, completely bald and as black as he can get. He struck me as the kind of person who could instill fear into just about anybody. A man to be friends with, because you'd have serious worries if he was your enemy. Everybody in the city knew about Jellyman. As a young man, he'd won a gold medal in the Tokyo Olympics in Greco-Roman wrestling, and he later took up professional boxing. He was a serious contender for British Heavyweight Championship when he was attacked by a bunch of thugs who tried to chop off one of his feet. They failed, but he was unable to fight. When he came into some money, he set up his famous nightclub, the Adawat Club, otherwise known as Jellyman's. It's a place where everybody is supposed to go at least once in their lives, but many people go there more than once. It's a famous after-hours drinking place that the police never touch, probably because there's never been a single incident of bother there. I suppose that's linked to the fact that Jellyman is the boss. He was cheerful and welcoming, and invited us inside. I felt almost privileged, but I did get a bit embarrassed when Alf said, Alright if I get me head down for an hour, Ace. I'm bloody knackered. You take one friggin' drink the night before and you're goosed. Like that all the bloody time now. The old bones suffering the blight and erosion of time. I could hardly believe it. And it was even more horrible when Tommy said could he get his head down as well, because he'd also had just one friggin' pint the night before. It had obviously been a bit of a heavy night in the pop for the two lazy gits. You two men sleep the sleep of the innocent, said Jellyman, laughing his head off. His house was brilliant, just as Leroy had said. I looked across the fireplace where there was a kind of huge iron or metal mask, like one of those welder's things. If you've never seen one like those before, it's a Brennan bronze, a genuine African mask, made about 300 years ago. You're interested in history, I hear? Well, that's from an ancient kingdom, one of the most civilized places in the world for hundreds of years, until your lot came along. My lot, I said. To be honest, I don't even know who my lot are. I can go back a generation to my mother, but no further. Well, those bastards that went out there. Not your lot, no. You probably come from Irish blood, and it's arguable that they were treated just as bad as my people. Thing is, though, I don't have no Irish art here. Just the stuff of my ancestors. Okay, that now. He was pointing to a gigantic kind of costume with a pointed hat and bright painted eye holes and a kind of thick grass skirt to it. That's part of the regalia of the Leopard Society. No, they are a strange lot, I can tell you. Bit like Nigerian Freemasons, only they got real juju on their side. None of this handkerchief round your bloody bollocks and shaking hands upside down and all that. Hey, what's that noise? There was a distant low growling sound, coming and going at intervals, louder and softer in turn. I had my suspicions, but I didn't want to tell Jellyman. He went off to investigate while I had a look around at his artifacts. There was a collection of about 100 wooden sculptures of men, women and animals, some of which were obviously naked. The breasts on some of the female statues stuck out like ice cream cones, so I don't suppose they were very accurate depictions, unless the babies got Mr. Whippy instead of milk. There were drums lying all around the room, and spears and shields on the wall. Also heads of animals unknown to me, probably things like gnus and greater kudus ikapos, and stuff like that. One thing in common about them, though, they all had horns. Then Jellyman came back, and he said, I can't believe I've ever seen a couple of grown men look so comfortable in bed together. That stepfather of yours got his arm all protective around the shoulder of his mate there, and they're smiling away and snoring. I just don't have the heart to wake 'em, lad. Oh, you've got to. Those two human beings will sleep for another 2 days without a break if you don't get in there and wake 'em. Alf Speed loves sleep more than he loves my mother and her wonderful food, I said, making a cheap joke at the expense of my legal next of kin. So we roused them from their slumbers and got on the road. Of course, on the road doesn't have much to do with travelling along it, as I know from experience. Alf will use any excuse to get into a pub, and it wasn't long until we met one. Do you know what? Said Alf, pulling the lorry up near the car park of the Grapes, which just so happened to be the first pub we passed. I think I've mislaid me bleeding birth certificate, and I need it for the passport. Passport? I said. Well, me and your ma were thinking about a bit of a honeymoon to the friggin' Canaries, so I'll have to... Oh, look, I'm going to go and phone her. Jesus, bloody birth certificate. Could be serious. Seeing as we're here, like, you fancy a bit of a link with lunch, lads? It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. because Jellyman and Alf are two of nature's entertainers, much like the parrot or the chimpanzee. Anyway, the winning story of the day was Jellyman's story of the African hand. When I was a kid, there was always a great deal of fear around Liverpool 8 of a great big black man known as Kenny Okuju, because people said he was that story requires reward of a liquid form, Ace, said Alf, who raced over to the bar to squeeze in another pint before the necessity of work interrupted pleasure. Anyway, with Jellyman on the job, we got the removal done in about an hour or so. I have to wonder about the efficiency and profit of Alf's work though, given that he sleeps most of the time and the wagon trudges along at about 6 miles an hour because of the drink having been taken. I suppose without Leroy he'd be in trouble. After the work was done, I displayed such an overwhelming, if completely false, interest in home cooking that Alf was forced to invite Jellyman and myself around for tea, which is what we had planned. When we got to Fazacurly, my mother said she'd lay on a bit of a treat. I had my suspicions, and I said, "What? A bit of duck à l'orange?" Which was, of course, a joke. "Oh, pull the other one, son, it's got bells on. You know me, I'll do you a favour. Steak and kidney pie. But it'll take a bit of time, because I've got to feed the kids. It'll have to be leftovers for them, though." What she didn't mention was that it was leftover steak and kidney pie, which I could tell from the brown colour and the slight smell of urine in the air as they were getting stuck in. The delay was no problem, though. It would give me time to wander along to old Harry's place, to finalise things one way or another. Earlier, when Jellyman and I had been doing all the hard labour, and Alf and Tommy were asleep in each other's arms in the driver's cab, I told Jellyman the full story of the anonymous letters, of my suspicions about old Harry, and of course about Leroy's investigations. We had to get at the source of the threatening letters, because some of them were getting seriously heavy, and that was why, on Leroy's advice, I'd gotten Jellyman involved. "And if it is him, if it is that fascist little shite," said Jellyman, "I think I'll have the solution."